Hello, all you super sensational cats. This is Denise Cardenas, and I teach English 2 at Robert Vela High School. When I decided to do my project, I wanted to focus on the novel I Am Legend because I feel that those novels in the horror and sci-fi genre can have literary merit. So, what we're going to be looking at today is the stuff of legends, fear, normalcy, and pandemics in Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. Do you want to come crawling back from the grave like a monster out of hell? If you're a novel, then the answer is hell yes. Because if you do, then you've got the thing called literary merit, which means that it's a novel that never really goes out of style because it touches on issues that are always current. When we are talking about I Am Legend, it is of the horror genre, so there are monsters. And monsters are a reflection of the fears of their time period. And so when we look at a monster, we need to look at it in terms of what fear does it exemplify. We're going to be talking about monster studies, which is a way to approach a work where the focus is a monster. In monster studies, the monster is a societal construct. It is not necessarily for entertainment while it is entertaining. While monsters are not taken seriously in academia, monster studies or a monster studies approach to literature really does showcase monsters in a very sophisticated light. While Richard Matheson did address several themes in his novel, I Am Legend, what we're going to be focusing on are the themes of isolation, change and adaptation, and normalcy. While I don't want to spoil the novel, a few plot points do need to be discussed before we delve deeper. The protagonist, his name is Robert Neville. He is blonde hair, blue eyes, German descent. He is the last man on Earth surrounded by vampires. To pass the time, he kills vampires and he drinks. During the night, he locks himself up and waits for the vampires to leave his front lawn. After 8 months, he gets a little tired of the same routine and he decides he's going to look for what caused everyone to become a vampire. And through his research, he discovers it was a bacteria. At about 3 years into his isolation, he finds a woman running through a field. He tackles her, brings her in, and later finds out that she is a vampire spy sent by the new society of vampires. In the end, he is captured and he decides to take his own life. Vampires were passé, grist for the pulp writer's mill, a tenuous legend passed from century to century. I find this quote really ironic because Richard Matheson understood that the sci-fi and horror genres are not taken seriously. What he cleverly does, though, is he takes these controversial themes and he dresses them up and disguises them with his monsters, and he's able to make meaningful work and discuss very important topics through his novels like change and race and how our ideas need to move on. He's also able to write about his fears in a way that is acceptable for the time. This next quote is one of my favorites. How long did it take the past to die? In monster studies, when you look at a monster, you need to look at the fears of the author and the fears of the people at the time. And so Richard Matheson, he was a World War II vet, and so there was the fear of nuclear war. In the novel, the vampire bacteria was spread on the winds of a nuclear bomb that was a result of a war with Russia. This was written in 1954, which was during the midst of the Red Scare. The government, the propaganda was telling you to be fearful of your neighbor because you don't know if they were communists. And so this is where you get the idea of the vampires. Robert Neville is surrounded by all of his enemies. With the what if fears of nuclear warfare, Richard Matheson was able to transform the monster into a germ. So he started with the vampire, who was already the embodiment of contagion. Old days, the vampire used to be blamed for the bubonic plague and then tuberculosis. Bram Stoker changed him into a more sophisticated, aristocratic style body, but it was still a body. Richard Matheson changed the shape entirely and turned the monster into a bacteria. Now, bacteria are even more frightening than a body because they were able to infect mass numbers of people at one time, changing Robert Neville's way of life. What the bacteria did is it really isolated Robert Neville, and in his world, no one was safe from it. He was the only one immune because he got bitten by a bat, and so that left him alone. And this isolation really makes Robert Neville a hard character to love at different points in the story. He is sexually frustrated, his wife has died, and there are vampire women at night who are on his front lawn who are showing off all of their goods to try to entice him to come out. And that leads him to drink, and then the drinking leads him to have a short temper where he breaks things, breaks microscopes, breaks his walls. Because of this, there are people who like the novel, but they can't like Robert Neville. While I do see their point, I think the bigger question is, if there is no one left in the world for you to impress, do you need to be likable? More than ever, I feel that the character Robert Neville is relatable because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think Richard Matheson did a very interesting job predicting the human condition when faced with a pandemic, when faced with isolation, when we're faced with our everyday lives being changed so quickly. Now, our predicament is not the same as Robert Neville's. We are not the last person on earth surrounded by vampires, but when we do walk out the door, there is that fear that someone next to you may be infected. This isolation and this fear has really done a number on us. After the initial shelter-in-place orders, there was a rise in domestic violence, depression, and anxiety. We had to find a new way to live our lives, and it was very, very different from what we were doing before. At the end of the novel, Robert Neville is looking out from his prison at the new society, the new vampires. The roles have reversed. The monsters have become the majority in the society, and now he is the lone human who has been attacking them, and now he is the legend and he is the monster. This last line in the novel has garnered a lot of controversy. There are those who feel that it is very racially charged. Robert Neville is white and he is Aryan, and he does not want to be part of this new dark society, being unaccepting of this new change. Others feel that Robert Neville chooses to take his life in the end because he just doesn't want to fit in. I, on the other hand, feel very differently. Robert Neville has been a hero, at least in his own eyes. Every time he kills a vampire, it's like he's avenging his old way of life. At that point, vampires were the monsters. Now, in the end, he realizes that he is now the monster. He was the one that was wrong. Because he had been killing monsters throughout the whole story, he had to kill the last monster alive, which was himself. He was able to see that he was in the wrong. I really do not feel like I'm done with I Am Legend. This novel has been a big part of my learning journey. I read it as an undergrad in my Monsters and Lit class. I taught it to my students once I became a teacher. I find that it's very engaging for male students, and Robert Neville is a fairly decent hero. Although he's alone in the world, he doesn't become a, raping lunatic monster. He does keep his humanity. And due to COVID-19, I really do want to teach this novel again. I think more students will find a relatable character in Robert Neville. Now, this novel is not on the AP list of novels for literary merit, and I'm sure that there are several novels with literary merit that have not been put on that list, but because it's not, there are no novel units to be found for this novel. Thank you, and that concludes my research.